Alright, so let's go over here and look at some of the properties that I didn't cover in the last video. Namely, steady stroke. So this is the setting if you had too much coffee in the morning. And what's nice about it is it doesn't have like this jagginess here. That's really hard to do with this brush, with this setting. So if you were making decorations on armor, this is an amazing brush. Okay. Down below, I get to Falloff base angle, which is a very confusing thing. Okay, so I'll try to cover this best I can. Let's get a new cube. Okay, right now I'm in a camera looking at the surface of this cube. And I'm probably at a 45-degree angle looking at it. You should probably change this to orthographic. Okay. Now with orthographic settings on, sculpting at this angle becomes a challenge with a stamp. So let's take this stamp and let's go down here below and choose a different stamp and use a practical application. Let's choose this stamp, for example. Let's make my brush bigger and turn off symmetry. So what I'm looking for is a very, well, uniformed look across the surface. Definitely not that. So here, let's kind of look at all these settings before we cover the angle. The first thing I would look at is spacing. So this right here, let's say this is 1024 by 1024. Spacing now dictates that right here is 0. So maybe I want like 90% of the map or the stamp to be used. Okay, that's better. Now it's not interacting with itself and it's a little clearer. Okay, now what about this between parts? Well, that's Falloff. So down here below, let's change the Falloff to something else. Now, I'm just going to manually change it. I think it's good to see that. Not so scary. Okay, let's look at the Falloff now. Much better. Notice it's starting to cap. Like, you can see it, but it's not very contrasty. Well, that's buildup. So if we go down below, you'll see buildup is at 42%. What if it's at 100%? Okay, I like this, but I feel that while I'm dragging across, it's really hard to, well, predict where the next stroke is going to be at. Well, that is called steady stroke. So let's change steady stroke to maybe 0. Now a little bit more control. I don't like how contrasty this is, so that's what I would say. The buildup needs to be turned down. Again, maybe 100% is not always a good idea. Maybe just below 100% is a lot better. You get the contrast without the tear. Alright, so now let me try to sculpt across this surface right here. Notice it sometimes doesn't let me do the corners. And when it does, it looks like this. So that is Falloff based angle. So let's change that. Not very apparent, right? So if I change this to something to like 0, it won't let me do anything on a corner whatsoever. It only allows me to do flat surfaces, and it only allows me to do flat surfaces if I'm in an orthographic view. So with it set to 0, and I mean absolute 0, this happens. So too much fall off being down will make it so I have to be in a very orthographic view in order for that to change, which isn't bad sometimes, because sometimes I don't want it to be on the surface. Sometimes I only want it to be on the top of the surface. But this is based upon the angle of the camera, and that's why it's really hard to cover. So now I can be at this angle, and I can still sculpt on the surface. Set too low, and then this angle right here won't allow me to do anything. So you'll use this, but you'll use it very sparingly sometimes. It's also very nice for back face culling not to occur, or back facing. So let's say I want the surface of a very thin mesh, but I don't want it on the back side of it. That's when I use this on very thin meshes. Alright, so orient to surface, that throws it right out the window. So what's nice about that? So no matter where I'm at, it does a nice look to it. So that's one of the features I might want to turn on sometimes. Okay. And lastly, my pen pressure minimum maximum size. This is kind of like common sense stuff, but again, the minimum strength, I always kind of keep it 0 because I don't have that steady of a hand, and I always kind of just keep this the way it is, and I play with fall off more than anything else, and strength. Alright, again, snap to curve will be covered later when we get to curves, but for right now, those are some of the very basic things that you should know about the brush attributes. And you can see just that one brush did about, what, 30 different applications, right? So you could imagine Mudbox is very powerful. It's just, again, very frustrating because of these things over here, knowing which one does what for the type of surface that you're looking at and looking for. Alright, so let's move on to the next video.